Ladies and gentlemen, today we have a really special guest. We have David Klefeker here with us. And to start right away, I want you to know who he is, what he's accomplished, and why he is in this podcast. Welcome to the show, David.
Thanks a lot, Miquel. How are you doing?
Great, great, great. Where are you calling from today? Where are you in the world?
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually currently here in Aqaba, Jordan, right along the Red Sea.
Nice.
We're down here for about a week, looking at several things and just kind of taking some time off with family.
Jordan, one of the places you like, it looks like Mars. We were chatting about that, right? These pictures.
Yeah. There's a place. Yeah, yeah.
That
So
you
there's a
posted.
place called Wadi Rum, and it's a really, really cool spot. You can basically camp out in the desert, and this time of year is probably the best time to do that. Anything past April is probably a bit too hot for most people. But yeah, there's some beautiful sites. I wouldn't necessarily recommend investing in real estate in Jordan, although they do have a CBI program, believe it or not. But I don't think it's really worth it. But there's beautiful, amazing history. Obviously, they've got the ruins of Petra, which is really cool. I don't know if you know Indiana Jones, you know that scene where in the middle of the desert, there's a thing that they go into. I think it's the Last Crusade. So that's here. You've got Wadi Rum, and then here in Aqaba, it's really nice. There's amazing diving that you can do here. So yeah, highly recommend it for tourism.
Beautiful. One of the places you like being, another one is Turkey. We're going to talk about Turkey in this episode. You investing that you share publicly, and we know the ones we follow you on Twitter. Definitely highly recommend it to follow you on Twitter for more in-depth, more details on everything we're going to talk about today. But to start off, what has David accomplished so far? What's in your sovereign portfolio? Why do you call yourself a sovereign nomad?
Sovereign nomad. Well, I think to kind of back up a bit. So I started out probably from the time I was 16, 17 as a serial entrepreneur. I've never been able to go to a 9 to 5, work in an office. I've always kind of done my own kind of march to my own horn, and it definitely started pretty early. And I started traveling internationally around 21, 22 years old. And I never really looked back. And that, from the time that I started traveling, I went to places all over the world, from Athens to Mumbai. I did a pretty cool little motorcycle trip across the desert. That was, that was kind of what started my my interest in emerging markets and the kind of the macro picture. I'm from a pretty small little town in Tennessee. And so, I was just itching to get out. And so that's kind of how it all started. And then over time, I started realizing, I've done everything from consulting, had a construction business and renovations. And at some point along the way, I realized that real estate was kind of the way to go. And so I teamed up with my mentor, who's now my partner. And so I think it was around 2015, and we built up a portfolio of properties, Airbnbs. And that's, I started doing Airbnbs back in New York around 2010. And we built up the Airbnb portfolio to about 45 at total. And then we also built up a multifamily that ranged from properties all across Florida, as well now in Hawaii. And but the sovereign nomad piece of it, that actually started probably right around 2019, 2020, when everything got shut down. And just before that, my wife and I, obviously, she's from Palestine, and so that also kind of gave some bit to why we wanted to be sovereign. I don't know how aware you are of that kind of issue in the world, but she doesn't have the greatest passport, and it's been very difficult for her to travel, period. But then when the pandemic happened, we were both locked down in our respective countries. She was in Palestine and I was in Florida, and we didn't see each other for about a year. And so through that time, I promised myself, I was like, never again am I going to be locked down by a government, by a bunch of bureaucrats. And so that's really what kicked off the sovereign nomad journey for us.
Wow. And also, I know I know that you had some inspiration, right? Some 3 mentors, 3 different personalities, right, that inspired your journeys. These names from other episodes I know are Jim Rogers, Doug Casey, and Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
Can you share a bit more? What's something like when you hear these names, what's the first things that come to mind? What's the biggest piece of knowledge, the golden nugget that you got from them, from each one of them?
Yeah, so I think that it probably comes down to looking behind the curtain is probably the best way I can explain it. All 3 of those guys were like, don't just accept what you're told to accept. Apply critical thinking and to pretty much everything, and especially for investing. And for me, it's funny. I read Kiyosaki when I was about 20 years old, and Jim Rogers right after that. And that's actually what inspired the motorcycle trip across India through the desert. And those guys, they've kind of been those, I don't know what you call like online mentors, digital mentors. And I was fascinated with the fact that you could find incredible value and incredible, not just investing, but there's a whole nother world out there. When you're from the US, you tend to kind of get put in, you grow up in this bubble, right? Thinking that everything revolves around the US, the world, the universe, everything revolves around the US. And so it blinds you to what else is out there, other opportunities. And so reading these guys, also there's The International Man by Doug Casey. That was another big one. And those guys just opened my eyes up to a whole nother world, looking beyond the chaos of maybe frontier or emerging markets, and seeing that there's opportunity, there's adventure. And so I was determined to find it.
I was sharing that many people read those books, many people got inspired by those stories, but not everybody takes action the way that you did. And I'm sure that it wasn't straightforward for you, just like, oh, I read this and I'm gonna do it. There might be some obstacles, some doubts that you had by that time. Can you recall some of the thoughts that you had after reading and before taking action?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a long time ago, but I think the big thing was that, once you know something, you can't unknow it, right? You don't know what you don't know until you know it. And for me, once I read these guys, it just planted a seed that I couldn't ignore. And it was a fire that I just, from the time that I finished both of those books, I was booking tickets immediately after that. Because I was like, and I think that's all I needed. Because I was already kind of, by the time I was 20, I'd already moved out of the house at 16. And I kind of already was on my own at that point. And so reading these guys was kind of the one light that I needed. And I was just like, okay, that's it. And I just started traveling and started booking tickets and sleeping in hostels and, trying to make friends where I could. And I was just all over the place, like I said. So yeah, I think the biggest thing was just the initial inspiration for what was possible and what was out there, and that there is an entire world of adventure out there. I didn't know that it would lead me to what I'm doing now, and what it would become, but it just showed me that there's a whole nother world that's possible. And I knew that I wanted to live in other countries. I knew I wanted to open and run my own businesses, invest in other countries. One of the reasons why I went to Kuwait, there's an opportunity that I found. I was living in New York at the time, and I met someone who had just mentioned that they were thinking about doing something in Kuwait. And so I created this entire business plan just as a friendly gesture, and I gave it to them. I said, "Oh, this is how I would do this if I was you." And they said, "Okay, great. When you come into Kuwait." So, I just took that next leap because like I said, I was just looking for any way to experience the world, and any kind of opportunities that came along, I jumped at them. And so I was in Kuwait for about 3 years, and it was a lot of fun. I traveled all over the Middle East. I was going to Dubai, went to Lebanon, which back then, this was 10 years ago, Lebanon was a completely different place than it is today, unfortunately. They look like they're really on their way kind of up and in recovering from, the last 20 years of all kinds of chaos. But unfortunately, it's gone a completely different way for them now. But yeah, that was an incredible journey, and just learning that, I don't know if you've been to the Middle East or not, but the Middle East is probably as far as opposite or as different of a culture as you can get to reverse the West, right? So if you go down to like South America, Central America, it's definitely different, very different culture, but it's not that far off, right, from the Western culture. It's definitely a multiple degrees off, but it's not almost like a complete 180. And the Middle East is definitely a 180 in terms of culture. And so that was another kind of thing that added to, I guess, the journey that would become the sovereign nomad.
You started with a difficult path. Everybody says, well, start with Latin America, exactly because of what you're saying, right? And then you moved directly to Mumbai, you took the motorcycle across the desert, all these stories, Kuwait, etc., etc. How old were you at that time when you started your first international trip outside of the US?
21.
21.
Yeah, 21.
And when was the first time you thought, I'm going to invest in property outside of the US, and you took action?
So the first time I thought about it was probably when I was 20, 19 or 20.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right after I read Jim Rogers' book. And because I read Kiyosaki at 19 years old. And so that's when the real estate bug started. And I flipped my first property when I flipped my first property when I was 17 by helping someone else. But yeah, the real estate bug was pretty much set in pretty early on. And then when I read Jim Rogers, that's when I was like, okay, possible. You can actually go and invest in emerging markets, invest in frontier markets. And yes, there is definitely risk. There's definitely higher risk, but it's not as extreme as maybe it seems, from the outset, right? Because a lot of people look at emerging markets, they look at frontier markets, and they see just chaos, and they think, okay, there's no way to make money in these types of markets unless you're from that place, unless you're born and bred from there, which is actually completely not true. And so, yeah, I would again just go back to those guys. And so when I first thought about real estate, was investing in international real estate, international markets, was 21. And then I started building a comfortability about it. Like, the more that I traveled, the more that I met people, I was always also seeking out kind of guys that were like a George Gammon, or a Jim Rogers or a Kiyosaki. And so, when I was living in Athens for several months, I met some guys, some investors, soaked up everything they could give me. And these guys were international investors as well. Same thing in Mumbai, same thing in Delhi, in Kuwait. There's, obviously there's money literally coming out of the ground. and so everybody is an investor there, and they have real estate holdings kind of all over. Pretty much in Kuwait, real estate is pretty expensive, but everybody in Kuwait owns something in Kuwait, but then owns like an entire portfolio abroad, whether that's across Europe, across Asia. And so that was really, really eye-opening, and it just added to the toolbox that I was kind of accumulating.
How old are you right now, to know how many years you've been investing?
I'm 42.
42. So that's
sorry, I'm aging myself too much. I'll be 42 in a month.
Okay. So it's like 2 decades, 21, 22 years of experience investing. Because it's people might be hearing, okay, I can kind of feel it's already risky to invest in real estate if it's the first property in my own country, whether it's the United States, whether it's Spain, or whatever in the world. But this idea of investing somewhere else, and especially somewhere like the Middle East, a place where the culture is so different, as you mentioned, what's something that with these 2 decades of experience, you'd be like, okay, if I started all over again, that's the first thing I would do to successfully invest in those markets?
That's a really good question. What was something that I would do differently? Is that what you're asking?
Yes. What advice would you tell like, your 21
something that I've learned that I would do differently?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or imagine to your kids as well. If your kids one day decide, oh, I want to invest there, you'd be like, okay, you got to take this into account.
Yeah, sure. So that's a little different. So for myself, I would say the thing for me is I learn hands-on, and I've always just been one to leap and then look where I'm leaping, if that makes sense. So for me, taking action has been the biggest way that I've learned and gained experience. And you're gonna fail for sure, but your failures, as it is to say, you look right. You don't really learn that much from your successes, but for me, I learned so much through those early years of just jumping in to a new market and figuring it out. Whether that's the language, the specific real estate market, the specific way that the real estate is done in that area. There's always opportunities in different markets and different ways. That's why there's so much opportunity, is because it's not developed, right? And it's not optimized like it is in the US or the West. And so, yeah, I would say the biggest lesson I can give myself would have been just do what you were doing and just keep doing more of it, and faster is probably what I would tell myself. For my kids, obviously, my kids are going to be homeschooled, and they're not going to ever go to any, obviously, a public school for sure, but not a private school either. My wife and I, we made a decision a long time ago that if we were going to have kids, which we both wanted, that we would homeschool them. And so, it's very, very important for me to teach them the skill sets that they need, teach them like real world stuff, how to create a business, how to look at markets, how to value markets, how to value assets. And they're going to be learning all this from a very, very young age, and we're going to be doing things together. We're going to be investing together. And so for them, they're going to, I'm a bit jealous of the way they're going to grow up, to be honest with you. But yeah, they're definitely going to benefit, but they're going to basically just do what I did, but from a much more earlier on perspective.
Yeah. So they will have more time to compound all that knowledge, all that wisdom, right? That they're getting from mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. So it's an interesting topic. We will go back to raising kids and educating them while you're traveling the world, these sovereign nomad kids already, and where you're having the kids. But now to keep it on the investing route, really interesting. Where do you have properties right now? And I know that you're also using them as a way to plant flags like residencies or passport. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure, yeah. So for me, I like to invest when I'm looking at investing in a market. I want that real estate to do a lot of different things for me. So I want it to give me diversification in a new market, and outside of maybe another market, and outside of a government, a particular government. And I want it to give me a store of wealth. I want it to give me location independent income. Now, a lot of people would say, oh, well, you can't move the real estate. Well, that's fine. If you've got a network of real estate all across the world, then you are location independent, and that income, whether say maybe that one piece of real estate is not giving you any income at the moment, the rest is. And so no matter where you're at, and as long as you obviously have it set up properly, then you're always going to have income, no matter if you're in Dubai or you're in Turkey. So that's something that I think is highly, highly valuable, especially now. And for me, it's also, so like, just take for instance Turkey. The real estate market there is mostly all cash. Okay, so versus like say the West, in the US, everything is highly levered, right? So everybody's got a mortgage, and that market, because everybody has a mortgage, the real estate values of the US are highly dictated by interest rates, whether they go up or down. Okay, well, in a place like Turkey, it doesn't really matter what interest rates are doing. The values are the values, because everybody is all cash. Everybody owns their place. They don't have a monthly mortgage payment. So the rates can go from 5 to 20. It's not really going to tank the market. And if you actually look back the last 20 years, the market's been pretty solid in terms of the Turkish real estate market overall, if you look back on an average. So obviously you can discuss inflation and what that obviously does to values in nominal terms versus real terms, but in terms of the boom and bust cycles that you typically have in say the US, you don't really have that in the Turkish real estate market. And again, it's because the Turkish real estate market is mostly an all cash, very low levered market, whereas the US has lots of debt. Everybody's up to debt their eyeballs. And it's a good and bad thing. It's pros and cons to both. But that's actually why I like investing and having the ability to invest in both types of markets. I mean, I think good debt is great. I mean, Kiyosaki is all about getting good debt, real estate, getting as much debt as you can, actually, as long as it's good, the good debt. And I absolutely agree with him. But in this case, I don't necessarily want all of my wealth to be in a market that is so highly affected by whatever the Fed is going to do on a Tuesday. Do you know what I'm saying? And then also, say you've got an entire market crash in the housing market in the US. If you need to sell, it's not really the best time to sell. But if you need to liquidate in Turkey, then the value is pretty much held. And so you've got some wealth preservation there, as opposed to investing in a place that is, again, highly dictated by, or the values are highly dictated by the interest rates.
Correct. And also when you sell in Turkey, you can use that money to buy cheaper in the States.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
you can geo arbitrage in some way the real estate as well, not just the currencies, which is the most popular among sovereign individuals, global citizens that talk about geo arbitrage currencies, but we can geo arbitrage real estate and time the market in some way. And one is strong, 100%. The other it's weaker. Interesting. And yeah, that was a question that I've got. If you don't have, when you said Turkey, it's about cash, it's like, all right, then you need cash from somewhere. If you would recommend somebody to invest in the emerging markets, let's say the Middle East or Turkey, which is an area of expertise of yours, is it better to wait until that person has a consistent cash flow or has some net worth already or made a sell of a business and then go into those markets. But if you are not wealthy yet, or you don't have that capital, go more on a west side in the US, for example, or other countries with possibility of leverage, of good debt.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. I think it depends on your overall strategy and what you're trying to accomplish. So I think before investing, period, you need to make sure you've got income. And that is probably, income is key. Income is king. And especially actually for sovereign nomads, right? Because I mean, you can do all the things you want to do, but unless you have something that's fueling your strategy, fueling your lifestyle, you can't invest your way to wealth. You've got to have the income, at least in my opinion, and from my experience. And because otherwise, if you're trying to invest your way to wealth, you're going to be constantly looking at your brokerage account. You're constantly looking at your Bitcoin price or whatever it is, hoping that the dollar goes, or the number goes up, right? And so if you focus on your income and build that income up to a certain point where you're then able to have a lifestyle that you can then invest, and whether the investment goes one way or the other, it doesn't matter. You've got the income that's fueling your lifestyle and supporting your lifestyle. For me, I think it kind of happens in three phases, or at least this is what I've learned, in three phases, right? Build the income, multiple income streams, location independent, super critical. Once you've got that to a healthy spot, then put that into something that, gold, if you want, do some Bitcoin, but I think that should be a bit later. But putting it into something like gold, where it's a savings, right? You can also have a solid amount of cash. I think everybody should have at least 6 to 12 months of cash reserves. I understand that inflation is going to kind of eat that away a bit, but I think 6 to 12 months, especially in the current environment, really critical. Once you've got that, get your gold. Again, it doesn't have to be hundreds of ounces of gold. 20, 30 ounces is, I think, plenty for starting out. And then once you've got that kind of solid foundation of wealth built out, then you can go and start looking at investing in emerging markets and playing with places like Colombia or Mexico or Turkey, Malaysia. But I think it's never good if you are feeling like in panic mode if the market goes down, right? For me, it doesn't matter, because again, I've got the income, I've got the savings, in cash and precious metals. And then when I'm investing in real estate, I'm looking at a 10, 15, 20 year time horizon. Now I do have flips that I do, which is, also produces some income, but that's a whole different thing. When I'm looking at buying real estate in a certain market, then I'm looking at, again, that 10, 15, 20 year time horizon.
Yeah, that was another question that I've got for you is, besides real estate, what other sources of cash flow do you have? Is there something you are actively working on, or just focused 100% on real estate to generate this monthly cash flow?
Yeah, so in terms of my income.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sources. Yeah, sources of income.
Sources. Sure. So a couple of online businesses, some consulting. We've got a property management company, asset management company. Also have Airbnb income and then real estate income. So there
we go. That's where the peace of mind comes from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
but that's kind of practicing what you preach. It's really, that's why I think it's so important, is because I can look at a market, I can invest in a market, and I can do it in such a way that is incredibly clear-headed, and I'm willing to take on maybe a significant amount of risk, because I know that I can sleep soundly at night because I've got the income to support myself and my family, if, whether this investment works out or not. And I feel that actually makes you a better, and especially, going back to the principles of Jim Rogers and Doug Casey and Kiyosaki and all those guys, is it just makes you a better investor. It just keeps you clear-headed, which is the most important thing, especially when you're investing in markets that may have larger kind of swings, or maybe has a bit more noise and chaos, and it helps you kind of cut through all that and focus on your initial or your overall investment thesis.
Totally. A lot of investors look for tips to calm down after they feel they are reacting, like go do some sport, sleep better, meditate, this, that. But wait, what if you could prevent all this and just like plan better? It sounds like what you're doing, right? You are so clear on the planning that then even if the market just does something, you trust your 15-year, 20-year vision, and you are chill, right? And you have other sources of income that allow you to remain calm and to not react.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's such a better way to, I mean, it might be a bit more, it might be slower or not as exciting, but it gets you there in a lot better position.
Mm-hmm.
And it just keeps you so much more clear-headed. When if you're buying, like, what, buying gold shouldn't be, okay, let me see if I can buy gold now and then sell it in a year from now, 2 years from now. Again, that's something that you're building, again, that foundation. You're building insurance, essentially. And anytime I'm buying gold, it's in my head, it's 15, 20, 30 years or more realistically, it's okay, this is what I'm buying for my kids to just give them, right? And if we need it, if something crazy happens, we've got it, but otherwise it's just there and I forget about it.
Yeah, really, really interesting. I want to get more into that. The first objection that I hear from people that do not have gold is, why gold? When they see these graphs on the internet that says, oh, if you invested in Bitcoin, you would be up 300% or whatever per year, and then gold is like, compared to inflation, right? In the US, it's like -5%, things like that. What do you think about these graphs, about this? Why do you think gold is really like this requirement, let's say, for a sovereign nomad, instead of buying Bitcoin, or instead of gold, using that money to buy more real estate or other sources of store of value?
Yeah, sure. So I actually 100% agree. Like, if you're buying gold so that you double your wealth or triple if you're looking and buying gold as a way to increase your wealth, then you're doing it for the wrong reason, in my opinion. For me, I'm buying it as, again, an insurance policy. I'm buying it as a way to build a really strong foundation that I can then invest from. That's all I'm doing it for. And I think, I mean, look, I agree. If you put the same amount of money into Bitcoin and you put it into gold, 9 times out of 10, and say 10 years from now or 5 years from now, or if you did it, say 10 years ago, oh my God, you'd kill it, right? And I mean, look, I think, and there's, the debate, Bitcoin versus gold, I think it's the wrong debate. I think Bitcoin is not gold at all. It never will be. And that's fine. I think if I have some Bitcoin, I think Bitcoin's amazing. It's got a lot of promise, and I hope it delivers, because I think it's a really interesting idea. And I mean, you can do so much with Bitcoin that you cannot do with gold. And so I think you should own both. Now, I don't think, though, that you should dump all of your money into Bitcoin and just sit there and hope and pray that the price goes up. And Bitcoin has a long way to go in terms of developing itself as a store of value and as an asset that you can invest in. So for me, it's definitely speculation. But I think for me, I would look again at gold as just an insurance policy and as a way to build a foundation that you can then invest and then invest in Bitcoin all you want, or speculate on anything you want, because at the end of the day you can sleep soundly because you have that foundation of wealth protecting you.
100%, and the 6 to 12 months of costs as well. They're in a bank account or multiple bank accounts, so you have this peace of mind. I really like
multiple, that. Definitely multiple bank accounts.
Yeah,
because
and multiple countries and multiple continents, right? Ideally.
Yeah. Especially after what we saw in Canada, like holy shit. Yeah. I mean, I know this is a bit anecdotal, but I was reading the news when the whole trucker rally was happening, and there was apparently a soccer mom who had invested, I think, $20 into kind of supporting the trucker rally. It was like one of those email blasts, and she got it, and she was like, yeah, this kind of makes sense to me. Let me just go ahead and donate, just not even really thinking about it. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, her bank accounts are frozen because she donates to this specific rally, to this specific protest. And so and the fact that they were able to do that so fast and without impunity to so many people, I mean, that was just another nail in the coffin for me. I was like, okay, from the pandemic to the lockdowns to that, it was just more evidence that you've got to develop your lifestyle that is independent of governments. That is like, basically, you've got to hedge yourself. You've got to become your own central bank, and you've got to gain your own autonomy over these bureaucrats who have just lost it, in my opinion.
Totally. And this happens with governments. This also happens with fintech. We've seen many threads and tweets, social media with frozen bank accounts, Wise and Revolut and this and that, which are helpful, and the apps are working well. You can send money fast, especially between two users of the same platform, etc. But the ease in which they can just click a button from whatever in the world and just like, oh, all the money you had there, if you don't prove whatever we want you to prove, you don't get the money back, or you even lose the money. Like I've heard clients that lost the money because they could not provide, and there was some issue in there. So I'm really thinking, David, what bank are you, or what banks are you looking to put your money in? Like your money, or when you do consultation for your clients, what are good reputation banks around the world that you'd sleep tight at night knowing that you have money there?
So I mean, again, things can change on a dime, right? So, and definitely what we've seen is things can change very quickly. And so I wouldn't kind of bet on one jurisdiction over another. I would say that there are definitely stronger jurisdictions to look at. Stronger ones being places like Dubai is one that's got a really strong and growing banking sector. Look at obviously the Singapores, Panama's got some that are not too bad. I'm not sure how they are down in Paraguay, where I think you've got another spot. Yeah, it's developing, right? I think so.
Yeah, it's developing. Paraguay, it's definitely not a first world country right now. Yeah, it has. It's I would consider more an emerging market.
It's got its own.
Let's say, in that category. Panama. I was also thinking about the Caribbean,
but
and I know that you even have properties right in the Caribbean.
So we got property in the Caribbean. I think when you're looking at like I said, banking sectors, or places that are good jurisdictions. I mean, look, I think there's some solid banks in Georgia. There's some solid banks in Turkey even. Now, it's really all about how much you're putting in those banks. And I wouldn't say put all your eggs in one basket, obviously. But I think more importantly is having access to these banks and setting up in a way that no matter where you're at or what happens, you're going to have access to funds. And for me, that's really what it's all about, is not putting, so much in any one bank or going into any one jurisdiction, but having a network where you've got access to kind of 3 or 4 different jurisdictions that really help out a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, totally. And when you say Caribbean, just to clarify, you mean Caribbean islands?
Yeah, exactly. Caribbean islands.
Yeah. And which ones are the most attractive to you? Because there are plenty
in terms
there.
Of banking.
Yeah, banking and residencies. Because we also know that you can get passports in there. So I am imagining that you invested somewhere that it's also a CVI program, something like that, to get a passport, or just
just
sure.
So
I'll profit.
Banking.
Yeah,
the Cayman Islands has some pretty strong banking, and they also have a really great vault. I can't remember the exact name of the vault they have there. Man, what is the name of that vault? But it's a really good vault. You can actually, one thing that I tell, some guys that will kind of ask me, okay, there's some guy that is working a 9 to 5 in the middle of Ohio, and they've got a family, they've got 2 kids, a dog, and he's like, look, I can't go offshore, and I don't really want to, but how can I at least start to create a plan B for myself and gain some autonomy? And I tell them, okay, the first thing you can do is super easy. You can buy some gold through a website that through this vault in the Cayman Islands. And so that way you're moving some wealth outside of the US. Now, obviously, as a US citizen, you've got to report everything. So I'm not saying, I'm saying do everything legal and check with your accountant and all that fun stuff. But it's an easy way, and it's a very fast way to put some money outside the US and into gold. And then they'll store it for you depending on how much it is. There's some storage fees or whatnot, but it's a super highly rated vault. You can do the same thing in Panama. You can do the same thing in Singapore. So that's number one, is what I would do. And for real estate, I don't. So I think the Caribbean passports and residencies are great for, again, this guy in Ohio, for him to just put some money in one of these Caribbean passports. I think it's like $150,000, $200,000, depends on the program. You get a decent passport for it, and it's all relatively fast and easy. You can do most of it online, and if you want, you can buy some real estate. I think that's probably the worst place to buy real estate for a passport. I think there's a lot of other better ways to go about it. The golden visa in Portugal is one. Dubai's got an interesting program. Yeah, Turkey. Yeah, so if you're looking to invest in real estate and get a citizenship, I think the Caribbean is not a great option at all. I think there's much better places to invest in real estate and get some kind of residency, golden visa, citizenship. Portugal being one, Dubai being another, Turkey being another. Even though Turkey's citizenship has gone up, the price of it from 250 to
400.
Yeah, I think it still makes sense for a lot of different reasons. But for the Caribbean, I think you're better just to go and give the donation, the 100K, the 125,000, and then be done with it, because obviously there's massive opportunity cost as well, right? So if you end up doing the real estate option, I think it's like 250,000. So we're talking almost $100,000 to $150,000 extra that you could have done on an investment that will earn you a lot better, or you could put it into Bitcoin and just flip it, or gold or whatever you want to do. There's a lot better things to do with that 150,000. I know it's hard for a lot of people to just bite the bullet and donate 100 to 150,000. That's why I think there's way better options than the Caribbean, but it's a great option for kind of the guy who who is not really able to put boots on the ground, not really able to leave the US, and just wants something very easy and fast and convenient, then I usually will tell them, okay, go and try one of the Caribbean passports.
Then what attracted you to have properties in the Caribbean?
Just diversification.
Diversification.
Yeah. And having not necessarily a base, but a income and a place that, if need be, that I can go to, and it's close to the US. So it's like a 3 to 5 hour flight. And typically they're direct. And so that's one. And again, this is, a lot of people say, well, give me the strategy. What's the strategy that I need to do? Give me the 1, 2, and 3. And it really depends on your situation. It depends on where you're at. Are you a 25-year-old that's making $75,000 a year, or are you 42 making $400,000 or $500,000 a year, and you've got a whole different set of things that you need to take care of and think about. And so like I said, it really depends on your strategy, and every strategy is going to be a little bit different, and it also evolves, right? I mean, for me, there's been things that we looked at doing 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, that we've changed a bit. The evolving world that's happening around us, because of our situation. I've changed a little bit now with our kids.
Because yes, you wanna invest in a place that you can live in, right? If shit hits the fan, you wanna be in a place that you at least enjoy. What's the point of having a property in a place that you never live, like in a tiny island in the Caribbean that you just invested there to get a passport?
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you kind of going back to one of your questions, what we were talking about earlier, is why real estate? And for me, what does it do for me? And there's that list that I told you about that I want, it to do several things for me. The income, the diversification. I want to get, a residency or a citizenship out of it. But it's also about creating a base, and I want that property to give me a sense of, I talk a lot about being a sovereign nomad, but for me, the nomad part is not about jumping from place to place, out of a suitcase every 2
weeks.
Now that was definitely my life in my 20s, but it definitely evolved. And for me, the nomad part is actually about the freedom to be able to go anywhere you want, as long as you want, for with who you want, right? And it's about having 3 or 4 properties, basically a network of bases that you're able to go to and spend as little or as long as you want, right? And everything is kind of there. You've already set it up as your home. You've got your wardrobe there, or you've got your Vespa or your car or whatever it is. But it's a home that you've set up, and especially now that I've got a family, it means so much more to us. So when we do go to stay in our place in Istanbul or even in Hawaii, whatever it is, it's already set up, and so we're not just having to come and take everything out of our suitcases. We can actually go to these places if we need to, at a drop of a dime, if shit does hit the fan, and we've already kind of got our stuff there. So we're not having to pack up everything. And again, especially now with kids, traveling with an 8-month-old is a whole nother ball game. But being able to have already some things, some personal stuff at our one of our bases is really, really valuable. At least it is for us, and the way that we want our sovereign nomad lifestyle to be structured.
Totally. To wake up and to have your coffee maker machine, to enjoy your
So
routines. Right? Totally. Peace of mind, because we are talking about, something happening, the world collapsing, shit hitting the fan. What do you expect, David, in the next, let's say, year, or let's talk to 2030, in this time frame, like shorter and then longer term? What are the things you are protecting from that you kind of predict?
So I think have you read the book, The Fourth Turning? Do you know about the concept or the idea?
Please
So
share.
sure. So the fourth turning is, I think the guy's name is Hal. I can't remember his first name, but essentially what the idea is that everything runs in cycles. And the fourth turning is about how, as kind of you have these like boom and bust cycles, every 10 years, you have a real estate boom and bust cycle in the US. And then you've got a kind of a larger debt cycle that happens. This is actually Ray Dalio's 80 to 100-year debt cycle that also kind of ebbs and flows. So the fourth turning is about one of these kind of cycles coming to an end. It's almost like the winter time. So you've got the spring, the summer, the fall, and the winter. Well, the winter is the fourth cycle, or sorry, the fourth turning, where a lot of kind of old paradigms get destroyed, so that a lot of new ideas can kind of come to fruit. And right now we're in the middle of a fourth cycle, or sorry, the fourth turning, or the kind of the end of one big cycle and the beginning of another. And it's incredible how much that has kind of rang true, especially over the last several years, with the pandemic kind of kicking that off. And so I think for us, it's really preparing us, for myself, for my family, setting us up in a position that no matter what happens, whether it's another pandemic, a world war, whatever, an overreaching government that decides to just click a button and shut your accounts off, whatever it is, I just want us to be prepared for it, and not just prepared for it, but also be able to thrive. Because yes, there's going to be a lot of things that get destroyed in this fourth turning, a lot of old paradigms that get destroyed, but there's going to be a lot of opportunity as well, in my opinion. And being able to be prepared for that opportunity, having a clear head, having a strategy, so that when the opportunity comes, you're able to take advantage of it. And like I said, thrive in this new paradigm, whatever it may be and however it may look. So that's kind of an overarching theme. Now, in terms of specifics, it's hard to guess exactly what the Fed is going to do and what the government's going to do. But for us, I'm trying to stay as cash heavy as possible, so that we can take advantage of any major market corrections that happen over the next year and a half, 2 years. I think, we're saddled with so much debt right now. So every government right now has so much debt, specifically, obviously, the U.S. And the U.S. is kind of the linchpin, in my opinion. And I think we could continue to see a lot more social unrest over the next 2 or 3 years. So like I said, I don't want to try to predict anything, but I think just continually building a strategy that allows you to be autonomous, taking extreme ownership of yourself, of your health, of your wealth, of your mobility, and just focusing on that, and just building your location independent income streams, building your foundation, being able to then invest strategically, getting some residencies, getting a second passport, I think is will probably be the most valuable thing you could do and spend your time on over the next 5-10 years.
Yes. So now let's go one more step here in the specifics. What's on the flag theory, right? Where is let's put different flags together. Let's take different ones and put it on a map. Where does David put healthcare? What do you put residencies? Where do you put passports? Where do you want to put flags in properties? Like, can you give us like 3-4 names for each category that you are interested or you've done for yourself?
Yeah. So again, a disclaimer would be
yes, depending on your age or situation in life, right?
Yeah. Okay. But with that being said, so in terms of the easy one is healthcare. Okay. So if you've got enough income and if you've got the money, then, I mean, there's amazing private hospitals all over the world. We, my daughter, she came very early. She was a preemie, and we had plans to have her in another place, but she had other plans for us. But thankfully, there was an absolutely amazing hospital that we were able to take her to in Istanbul. And it was a private hospital. We had a private room. They had amazing services, amazing NICU. And yeah, you can find this quality of healthcare all over the world. Whether you're in Mexico, whether you're in Brazil, Singapore, Malaysia, it's accessible. It's there as long as you are able to afford it. So that would be the healthcare part of it. Yeah, check that.
Healthcare. We got it.
Yeah, and so for a flag, I think again that's going to all depend on your lifestyle. So for us, what we value is a community that is family oriented, that's got traditional values. And one of the reasons why I really like the Middle East is maybe different culturally as it may seem to the West. Family is everything, and very very similar to South America, I think. But you've got obviously in South America and Central America, you've got to also kind of think about crime. But in the Middle East, in places like Dubai and Turkey, it really just comes down to the things that we're looking for and the things that we're valuing. And here in the Middle East, places like Dubai and in Turkey, and Singapore, there's strong family values, very low crime. And so these are things that we look at when we're looking to set up a base. It's a little bit different than when I'm looking at markets to invest in specifically for returns. But this is what we are looking at when we're setting up bases.
Totally. So this is for properties. We talked about as well bank accounts. You mentioned, Georgia, it's really good. Now they are saying they are signing this thing, the CRS for 2024. Let's see what's going to happen in there. Then we also have Panama. We have Cayman Islands that you recommended, the bolts, Dubai, also very strong in banking. What about passports? What passports, or how many, and if you want to disclose some of them you have? Well, you mentioned that you have a US one, right?
Yes. Yeah, I've got a US one. We've got several others. We've got one that I'm working on in Turkey. We've got one that we're working on in Portugal, and then a few others, and then some residencies. Dubai, working on the residency in Dubai. Actually, very interested in the one that I think you're doing down in Paraguay.
Yes,
that's
correct.
Really interesting. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. I'm probably going to be down there towards the end of 2023, checking that one out. Looking at the one for Mexico as well. So when I'm looking at like residencies and passports, it's about kind of creating a solid portfolio. So one residency or passport might fill the gaps of another residency or passport. Like if you take the Turkish passport, for instance, it's not really that strong, but I love the overall package that you can get out of that, right? They don't mind if you've got multiple citizenships or residencies. And it's a great one that you're able to pick up some strong real estate that returned really well in a great emerging economy, as well as a solid passport that I think, in my opinion, will get stronger over time. And then looking at a Portuguese passport, I think it's a great option, but I'm not so keen on living in Europe over the next 10, 20 years. But for right now, it's a really strong passport, and it definitely fills in the the holes of, say, the Turkish passport. And so with a Turkish and a Portuguese passport combined, that's a really strong set of travel documents to make sure that you can travel pretty much anywhere you want, no matter what. Same thing with residencies. I really like the program that Dubai has. I think that's a strong residency to have. I really like, you can have your own opinions on Dubai, but I think being able to go there at a moment's notice, if you need to, is a really strong strategy.
Totally, I like this idea of comparing one with another, and you had pretty much these two continents very well covered, and also with the Middle East, I guess you also have part of Asia as well that you can travel to. So you've got that part. The ones that are not talked that much, it's the African ones. Do you have any desire, or have you looked into African residencies or passports?
Yeah, I think there's some interesting programs. I haven't done any of those myself, but I think there are some ones that are emerging that are interesting. But for me, that my focus is really Asia, the Middle East, and now Central and South America.
Totally. So we have another flag check, and the last one, having kids. Where do you think it's a good place to have kids? Now that we are talking about sovereign nomads, right? And probably our audience is going to think as well about building a family oriented, where it's a good place, to set up your kids for less tax burden and also more for sovereignty.
So that's like multifaceted. I think if you're going to have a kid, the best place to have the kids is a place where you're going to be able to get citizenship or residency out of them, right? So put them to work the moment they're here. Good places to have your kids are going to be places like Mexico, Brazil, Chile, but you've got to spend a year before you give birth there in Chile. But the Chilean passport is incredibly strong, one of the strongest in the world, actually. Portugal, the same thing. You need to spend a year, have a year's residency in Portugal. But as long as you do that, then you have the kid in Portugal. The kid immediately is able to get and apply for citizenship, and then you can naturalize through the kid eventually. And so those would be my places to give birth, to have the kid, and they all have amazing private hospitals that you can utilize. In terms of raising them, where to raise them, again, for us, it's about finding these places that really values family traditional values, and but also gives them some room and space to be able to for us to be able to raise them the way we want, right? Because like I said, they're going to be homeschooled, but at the same time, I want to be able to connect and link with other families who are doing the same thing we are, and the same, find a community, which is really, really important, and being able to collaborate with other families, and be able to socialize the kids, be able to do things with those families. So for us, that really isn't a specific country, as more it is connecting, like I said, and developing these kind of global communities. There's a guy who he's created an online kind of homeschool friendly academy for kind of people like us and sovereign nomads and expats. I think his name is Mikkel Thorup, and he's got a YouTube channel. I can't remember the name of it, but that's his name is
Money
Mikkel
Expat,
Thorup. And
Money Expat, or Expat
sounds,
Money.
yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yes.
Yeah, Expat Money. I think that's it. And yeah, so he's developing something that looks really interesting. And again, it's just something that you can tailor make for yourself and tailor make for your kids, to be able to give them the best opportunities possible.
Totally. David, thank you so much for all the golden nuggets that you shared. You are definitely very, very knowledgeable about these, something that really attracted me, seeing your tweets, like all the detail or the granularity that you give. And I also believe you've been very, very generous with all the specifics on the where to look, the windows that you opened here today in this episode. Thank you so much for coming. Any last message? And of course, where to find you? What are the best ways to reach out?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on Twitter. Obviously, I'm on there quite a bit, at Klefeker. Then my wife and I also have a YouTube channel. It's called How We Life. Just basically shares our more of like our day-to-day, our family life, traveling with kids now, what that's like. And then I also have a website called The Sovereign Nomad. You can check me out on there. And yeah, I mean, I really appreciate you having me on. Thanks for your patience with this hotel Wi-Fi. That seems like it doesn't want to cooperate. But yeah, man, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Yes. The last question, and one that is going to be recurring in all episodes, is who do you think should come next into this podcast? Who do you have in mind?
Who do I think?
Yes. Or who would you like to see
so many good
in this episode? One name that comes to mind would be like, oh, Miquel, I'd love you to have this person, or I want you to introduce you to this person to be your next guest. And then in private, you can share some more names. But who comes to mind?
My good buddy Ladislas is probably a good guy to have on. From the Wandering Investor.
Okay.
That's that's probably my go-to guy right there.
Yeah, we'll reach out to Ladislas. Thank you so much, David. Have a great day. And everybody listening to this podcast, you can check out the other episodes. You can check out David's social media. And yes, I'll see you in another one. Until then, be extraordinary. Adeu.